world, hello the internet, hello Jason Isaacs, and apologies to Jimmy. At least I would apologise to Jimmy if he was still around to hear it and I knew him personally, which obviously I don't because he's dead and he died pretty much the year I was born, I think. But anyway, that was, of course, Jimi Hendrix's extraordinary rendition of the Star Spangled Banner at Woodstock. If you haven't heard it properly, please do so, because my system just doesn't allow justice to that extraordinary piece of work. I hope, however, I can provide justice to, or at least in some small part, to the politics of the United States. Now, it may be that you are approaching American politics for the first time. It may be that this is part of your revision program, but here we're going right back to the very start of the American politics course. And for the last time, for those students who are facing the A2 exam, in 2018, you will have the Unit 3 and Unit 4 structure as laid out ahead of this. After that, in 2019, we'll be on to the new spec, and I will probably have to re-record this, or then again, I might not bother, because the general themes are consistent. And the general themes are trying to make sense of the United States. And it doesn't hurt to point out that the United States is very different from the UK and indeed from Europe. You can see there just how bloody big it is. Now, this isn't really so much to show how large the United States is. It is very large. I think we know that. But what I really want to try to get across to you is the sense of diversity that is attached to the United States. I mean, obviously up here we've got the Scandinavian countries, which are cold and full of fjords and stuff like that. And then down here we've got the bottom part of Italy and Sicily, and of course over here we've got Spain, and it's bloody hot. So if you think that the United States goes essentially from the top of Scandinavia down to the top, or the very, very bottom, the toe, if you like, of Italy's boot, it'll give you some sort of sense of the diversity that is within that. We've got mountain ranges, we've got plains, we've got rainforests, we've got swamps, we've got pretty much anything you could wish to think about, and it is vast. That's Alaska. You can see there just the sense of the scale of Alaska. That's 1,000 miles. New York to Orlando. Just look back there. New York to Orlando is pretty much the same from Copenhagen down to Rome. You know, we're looking at a very, very large country, and a very diverse country, a country that is radically different. It can be explained to a certain extent in terms of three mountain ranges. If we, that is the West, the UK, the Anglo-Saxons who arrived here, we arrived here, we colonized all of these bits down here, and then eventually we were pushed over the Appalachian Mountains by sheer weight of numbers. And people getting bored as well. And then we drove across here, we went all the way across here, and then we hit the Rocky Mountains, and that took a while to get over, and so eventually we got over those, and then we got to here, and we got another mountain range. Now this one wasn't quite so dramatic in terms of getting over it, but what this mountain range had that nothing else had was gold, lots and lots of gold. And so America can, in that sense, and certainly in terms of the Anglo-Saxon tradition, be seen as the story of traversing three mountain ranges. Now, of course, there are other traditions. We've got the one coming up from the south, and I can't believe I've just done it, but I've just completely overwritten the entirety of the original nation. That is the Indian population who were here and were victims of mass genocide, essentially. So the United States is a place of contrast. It's a place of radical differences, and rather than try to explain that myself, I'm just really showing you the picture. So this was the original bit here. Then we've got the Louisiana Purchase here, so that's 1803. Then we've got the Texas annexation in 1845, Mexican cession 48, Oregon of 1846. It is all about, oh, sorry, and don't forget the Alaskan Purchase in 67, and then the annexation of Hawaii in 1898, etc., etc., etc. And we can see how America has largely been pieced together. We talk about the founding fathers and the initial spur of enthusiasm in 1789, but that had been going on for hundreds of years, or 100 years or so, and it continued to go on after that for a long time. So America needs to be seen, as much as it had that single revolutionary moment in 1776, yes, but it was then further built, just as it had had many stages leading up to that pivotal year in 1776. And these are explored really well in these videos here, and in various other bits and pieces you can find over the internet, and I will link off to all of these in the description at the end. But what we're going to start with, really, our course starts in 1776 with the Declaration of Independence, which is this, and it's a stunning piece of work. It really is quite an amazing piece of work. And looking at this, you should really make yourself familiar with these two first paragraphs. In particular, some critical ideas that emerge as you go through it. That we hold these truths to be self-evident, all men are created equal, certain unalienable rights, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Now, this is the bit that I get really excited about. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That is essentially as good a definition of democracy as you are ever going to find. And also within that is tangled up the idea of limited government. So already in the Declaration of Independence, we are starting to see key ideas emerging. This is another bit that perhaps might become significant as Trump's administration moves on. But again, let's look at this. We look at the Constitution as an evolutionary document. Certainly it involves three critical stages. The first stage are the Articles of Confederation. Now these were this was essentially a concord designed to help the founding colonies fight the British. And it worked in that sense. It saw off the British, but it didn't establish itself as an effective mechanism of government. The central government was far, far, far too weak. It did, however, establish the primacy of the states, and that's very important, and we'll come to that later. But the central government was too weak really to do much. The states themselves were too strong. It was really, as it says there, a confederation of independent states. In order to try to rectify that, we came up with the draft constitution, the initial constitution as it was in 1787 to 88. Now this is the unamended version, and for many as a result it was far too strong. It gave too many or too great a power to the federal government, and 13 states refused to ratify it. So we start off with the Articles of Confederation, which is too weak. We move on to the draft constitution, which is too strong in terms of federal government. And that leads to the Great Compromise, the Massachusetts Compromise, the Bill of Rights. These are the first 10 amendments that sit at the back of the Constitution and are generally considered part of the Constitution itself. It was only with the passage of these particular articles, with these particular amendments, that we see the primacy of the individual asserted and the primacy of individual states asserted. The Ninth Amendment says if there's a right that we haven't come up with yet, but it's not in the Constitution, then it may very well still apply to people. In other words, it didn't limit the rights of the people to those that were specifically in the Constitution. And it also went on to say, if there's something in the Constitution that the federal government that says the federal government can do something, then the federal government can do that. If it's not explicitly stated in the Constitution, then that power necessarily accrues to the states, and that's really, really important. So this is the central compromise that was designed to bring together the good bits of the Articles of Confederation and the good bits of the Constitution while tackling the bad bits of the Constitution. So we're trying to strike that happy medium between independent states and a functional central government. That is the critical idea. But that itself gives rise to various problems in the Constitution. It was ratified in 1789. Since then, it's been amended. Well, there are 27 amendments. We subtract 10 for the initial Bill of Rights. We can subtract another 2, one for the abolition and the second for the abolition of abolition. And we wind up with a Constitution that has been amended 15 times since its initial ratification, 15 substantive times since its ratification. And it's a blinking good document. It's really, really, really important. And I do urge that you look at this particular John Green video here. Again, I'll link off to that at the end, because this is the central problem that lies at the heart of this document. Now, the Constitution is absolutely brilliant. There's no doubt about it. Don't even think about it. The American Constitution has been amended 15 substantive times since 1788. In that time, France has had 5 constitutions. France is on its 5th separate republic. The Italian Constitution, people stopped counting. Communism rose, fell. The British Constitution has stumbled along. The American Constitution stands, and that is extraordinary. However, that does not mean that it is perfect. It is the work of men. And by men, I mean men. There were no women, officially at least, involved in the drafting of the Constitution. And as a consequence, it is flawed. It is the work of humans, and therefore it bears evidence to human error. There are mistakes in it. It is the work of compromise. It brought together differing sides, and they didn't always agree. And as a result of that, we've got bodges in the middle of it. And I'll explain what I mean by all of this in a moment. Specifically, the compromises, the Great Compromise. That is between the small states and the big states, and that gave rise to our bicameralism. The idea we've got a house which is populated by a house that is populated by population, and then we've got a Senate which is populated on a strict 2 representatives per state. So there you have the rights of the states upheld, while also having a sort of democratic solution in the House of Representatives. We also have the odious 3/5 compromise. Now, this was a compromise between the slave states and the non-slave states, and this contains the 3/5 clause. If you don't know what that is, go and look it up. It will blow your mind. It has, of course, since been amended out, thank God, but it's still in the initial draft. There was the democratic compromise. This is the compromise between the plutocrats and the populists, those who believed in an elite theory of democracy, who didn't want the people involved too heavily, and those who thought that that bit about deriving its just powers from the consent of the governed should actually be taken seriously. Again, all of this will be explored in much more detail in the course. And then we have the Massachusetts Compromise, which is the Bill of Rights that I've just mentioned, between the Federalists, led primarily by Hamilton, and the Anti-Federalists, led primarily by Madison. Again, trying to reconcile the needs of a strong federal government with the independent states, or the autonomous states. So you've got compromises strewn across all of this. And the problem comes if we try to look at the Constitution, as a perfect document. If we look to the Constitution to have all of the answers in it, that if we look hard enough and if we think hard enough about the Constitution, a solution will reveal itself. Well, it won't. It won't. There are compromises and there are budgets. The Constitution is not perfect. We have tension between the federal government and state governments, individual freedom and state authority. We've got ambiguity, the Second Amendment, which is all about the right to bear arms. What does that mean? We've got the Eighth Amendment, which is cruel and unusual, but it never actually specifies what that means. We've got potential for gridlock, and then we've got the separation of powers and checks and balances. This was a working document. It wasn't necessarily supposed to be dogma or canon. And there are anti-democratic elements in the Constitution. There's an elite theory of democracy, and that's very important. And again, we have the potential for judicial rule. Now, this is not necessarily explicit within the Constitution, but it is a direct consequence of all of the bodges and compromises and fudges that exist in the Constitution. Sooner or later, everything winds up in the Supreme Court, and it's up for the Supreme Court to tell us what these various bits and pieces mean. Right, I'm running out of time, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to link off to resources. I've got a few resources of my own here, which I hope will prove useful, and I'll link off to those. But I will also include links for these two. Now, these are the Crash Course in US Governments and Politics. It's a really, really good resource that you should make full use of as you go through this course, or indeed for your revision. And also, Hip Hughes History. I'm a huge fan. A lot of people don't like him. I don't care. I think he's brilliant. And very much a first port of call for me when I'm looking for interesting points about the American government. And that's it for this particular presentation. This could be the first of many, or indeed the last of yours as you are going on with your revision. Please do send me your questions, your comments, any errors, let me know, because that's how we make things better. Over to Jimmy.